The sight of a young mother holding her baby, while her two small children clung to her side in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, created one of the most heart-wrenching moments of his final weeks on the bench. Maria Gonzalez was facing a parking fine that represented more than just money to her. It was a choice between paying the court and feeding her children. What Judge Caprio did for this struggling family would not only shock everyone in the courtroom, but would also create a moment so powerful that it would be remembered as the perfect example of why his approach to justice touched hearts around the world. The morning of December 3rd, 2025, began like any other in the Providence Municipal Court, but by the time it ended, everyone present would understand why Judge Frank Caprio had become one of the most beloved figures in American justice. Among the defendants scheduled to appear that day was Maria Elena Gonzalez, a 28-year-old single mother whose story would create one of the most emotionally charged moments ever witnessed in the courthouse that had become famous worldwide for its unique blend of justice and compassion. Maria's journey to Judge Caprio's courtroom had begun 3 weeks earlier on a particularly difficult Tuesday morning. As a single mother working 2 minimum-wage jobs, cleaning offices at night and serving tables during lunch shifts, every minute of her day was carefully planned around the needs of her 3 young children, Isabella, age 6, Miguel, age 4, and baby Sophia, just 3 months old. The parking violation that brought her before Judge Caprio had occurred during one of the most stressful periods of her life. On the morning she received the ticket, Maria had been rushing to get Isabella to school before her lunch shift at a downtown restaurant. Baby Sophia had been sick with a fever all night, and Maria hadn't slept more than an hour. Miguel was also showing signs of coming down with the same illness, making the morning routine even more challenging than usual. As she hurried through downtown Providence, desperately searching for a parking space that wouldn't make her late for work, Maria made a decision that would ultimately lead her to one of the most important encounters of her life. Seeing no legal parking spaces available and knowing that being late to work could cost her the job she desperately needed, Maria parked in a space reserved for deliveries. She left a note on her windshield, explaining her situation and promising to move the car as soon as her shift ended. The note read, "Please don't ticket me. I'm a single mother working to feed my children. I will move my car by 3 p.m. Thank you for understanding." Despite her plea, when Maria returned after her shift, she found a parking citation tucked under her windshield wiper. A $75 fine that might as well have been $750 given her financial situation. The reality of Maria's life was one of constant financial stress and impossible choices. After rent, utilities, childcare, and basic necessities, there was rarely money left over for anything else. The $75 parking fine represented food for her family for nearly a week, or the cost of baby formula that Sophia desperately needed. It was money she simply didn't have, but failing to appear in court or pay the fine could result in additional penalties, a suspended license, or even worse consequences that could jeopardize her ability to work and care for her children. For 3 weeks, Maria agonized over what to do about the ticket. She tried calling the court to explain her situation, but the administrative staff could only tell her that she needed to appear before the judge if she wanted to contest the citation. She considered borrowing money from family members, but her elderly parents lived on fixed incomes, and her siblings were struggling with their own financial challenges. The stress of the situation affected every aspect of her life. She had trouble sleeping, lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, and found herself snapping at her children over minor issues. The night before her court appearance, Maria barely slept at all. She spent hours trying to figure out how to arrange childcare for her court appearance, but with no family available to help and no money to pay a babysitter, she realized she would have to bring all 3 children with her to court. She had heard stories about Judge Caprio's compassion, but she also knew that judges were required to enforce the law regardless of personal circumstances. As she prepared formula for Sophia and laid out clothes for Isabella and Miguel, Maria said a prayer that somehow, some way, things would work out. The morning of December 3rd dawned cold and gray, matching Maria's mood as she prepared her children for the trip to court. Isabella, her 6-year-old, seemed to sense her mother's anxiety and kept asking why they had to go to see a judge. "Are we in trouble, Mama?" she asked, her brown eyes wide with concern. Maria knelt down to her daughter's level and tried to explain in terms a child could understand. "Sometimes adults have to go to court to talk to a judge about things, mija. We're not in trouble, but Mama got a ticket and I need to talk to the judge about it." Miguel, at 4 years old, was less concerned about the court appearance and more interested in whether they would see police officers in real courtrooms like on television. Baby Sophia, oblivious to the stress surrounding her, continued to battle the cold that had been keeping the entire family awake for days. As Maria gathered the diaper bag, baby bottles, and snacks to keep the children occupied during what could be a long wait, she felt the familiar weight of single parenthood, the constant responsibility of making decisions that affected not just her own life, but the lives of 3 innocent children who depended entirely on her. The bus ride to downtown Providence took 45 minutes, during which Sophia fussed intermittently and Miguel peppered his mother with questions about courtrooms and judges. Isabella sat quietly, still worried about why they were going to court. Maria used the time to mentally rehearse what she would say to Judge Caprio, trying to find words that would convey her desperation without sounding like she was making excuses or seeking pity. When they arrived at the Providence Municipal Court, Maria was struck by how intimidating the building appeared. The formal architecture and serious atmosphere made her feel even more anxious about the upcoming hearing. As they passed through security, the metal detector beeped because of Sophia's diaper bag, causing a minor delay that added to Maria's stress. The security guards were kind and understanding, helping her reorganize the baby's supplies after the inspection. But the experience reinforced how out of place she felt in this formal legal environment. The waiting area of the courthouse was filled with dozens of other people who, like Maria, were there to face various traffic violations and minor infractions. As she found seats for her small family, Maria noticed that she was one of the few people who had brought children to court. Isabella and Miguel tried their best to sit quietly, but the long wait and unfamiliar surroundings made them restless. Sophia, still fighting her cold, began crying just as other defendants started being called before Judge Caprio. As Maria tried to comfort Sophia while simultaneously keeping Isabella and Miguel occupied, she became increasingly aware of the stares and whispers from other people in the waiting area. Some seemed sympathetic to her situation, understanding the challenges of bringing 3 young children to court. Others appeared annoyed by the noise and disruption, making Maria feel even more self-conscious about her circumstances. She had brought coloring books and snacks to keep the older children occupied, but after more than an hour of waiting, even her best preparations were proving inadequate. When Court Officer Michael Rodriguez finally called Maria Elena Gonzalez to approach the bench, Maria felt her heart racing. She gathered Sophia in her arms, took Isabella and Miguel by the hands, and walked toward the front of the courtroom. The sight of this young mother approaching the bench with 3 small children immediately captured the attention of everyone present, including Judge Caprio himself. Judge Frank Caprio, who had presided over thousands of cases during his legendary career, recognized immediately that this case would be different from the routine traffic violations he typically handled. The sight of Maria struggling to manage 3 young children while maintaining her dignity in his formal courtroom touched something deep within him. As she approached the defendant's table, Judge Caprio could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the careful way she held herself despite obvious stress, and the love and protection she showed toward her children even in this intimidating environment. "Good morning, Mrs. Gonzalez," Judge Caprio said in his characteristic warm tone, immediately putting emphasis on treating her with respect and dignity. "I see you have some very important people with you today. Would you like to introduce me to your children?" This simple gesture of acknowledging her children as individuals rather than merely distractions immediately began to ease Maria's anxiety and demonstrated the empathy that had made Judge Caprio beloved around the world. Maria's voice trembled slightly as she responded, "Good morning, Your Honor. This is my daughter Isabella. She's 6. This is Miguel. He's 4. And this is baby Sophia. She's 3 months old. I'm sorry I had to bring them with me, but I didn't have anyone to watch them." Judge Caprio smiled warmly at each child, waving at Isabella and Miguel, who seemed both fascinated and intimidated by the formal courtroom setting. There's no need to apologize, Mrs. Gonzalez. Your children are welcome in my courtroom any time. Now, I see you're here regarding a parking violation. Can you tell me what happened? Judge Caprio's question was asked with genuine interest and concern, setting a tone that indicated he was prepared to listen to her full story rather than simply process another routine case. Maria said next would create one of the most emotionally powerful moments of Judge Caprio's final weeks on the bench. Speaking in a voice that carried the weight of months of financial stress and single-parenthood challenges, Maria began to explain her situation with remarkable honesty and dignity. Your Honor, I received this parking ticket 3 weeks ago when I was trying to get to work. I work 2 jobs. I clean offices at night after my children are asleep, and I work lunch shifts at a restaurant downtown. The morning I got this ticket, my baby was sick with a fever. My 4-year-old was getting sick too, and I was trying to get my oldest daughter to school before my lunch shift started. Maria paused, shifting Sophia to her other arm as the baby began to fuss. I couldn't find any legal parking spaces, and I knew that if I was late to work, I might lose my job. I left a note on my car explaining that I was a single mother and asking not to be ticketed, promising to move my car as soon as my shift ended. But when I came back, I'd gotten a ticket anyway. Judge Caprio listened intently, noting not just Maria's words but also the way she held herself with dignity despite her obvious stress, the careful way she managed her children, and the genuine remorse in her voice for having violated the parking regulations. Mrs. Gonzalez, can you tell me about your current financial situation? Are you able to pay this fine? The question that Judge Caprio asked next would lead to a moment that would shock everyone in the courtroom and demonstrate why his approach to justice had touched millions of hearts around the world. Maria's response was delivered with a combination of honesty and dignity that immediately captured the full attention of everyone present. Your Honor, I want to be completely honest with you. The fine is $75, and right now that represents almost a week's worth of groceries for my family. After I pay rent, utilities, and childcare so I can work, there's very little money left over. I've been trying to figure out how to pay this for 3 weeks, but every time I think I might have the money, something else comes up. Baby formula, medicine for the children, or something breaks down and needs to be fixed. Maria's voice grew stronger as she continued. I'm not asking you to dismiss the ticket because I don't think I should pay it. I know I parked illegally, and I take responsibility for that. But I'm asking you to please work with me on a payment plan, or give me more time to pay it, because right now I have to choose between paying this fine and feeding my children, and my children have to come first. The courtroom fell completely silent as Maria finished speaking. Her words carried such genuine emotion and dignity that everyone present could feel the weight of her situation. This wasn't someone trying to avoid responsibility or make excuses. This was a mother facing impossible choices with remarkable strength and honesty. Judge Caprio sat quietly for several moments, processing not just Maria's words, but also observing the way Isabella had moved closer to her mother, sensing the stress of the situation, and how Miguel was trying his best to stay quiet despite being in an intimidating adult environment. Baby Sophia had finally settled down, perhaps sensing the serious nature of the moment. When Judge Caprio finally spoke, his words would create one of the most emotionally charged moments ever witnessed in his courtroom. Mrs. Gonzalez, I want you to know something important. You say you have to choose between paying this fine and feeding your children, and you're absolutely right. Your children must come first. Any judge who would force a mother to choose between justice and feeding her babies doesn't understand what justice really means. What Judge Caprio said next would shock everyone in the courtroom and create a moment that would be remembered long after his final day on the bench. Mrs. Gonzalez, I'm not just dismissing this parking ticket. I'm dismissing it with prejudice, which means you will never have to worry about this citation again. But more than that, I want to do something else for you and your beautiful family. Judge Caprio then did something unprecedented in his decades on the bench. He reached into his own wallet and pulled out several bills, walking around from behind the bench to approach Maria directly. Mrs. Gonzalez, I want you to take this money, not as payment from the court, but as a gift from one parent to another. Use it to buy groceries for your children or formula for baby Sophia or whatever your family needs most right now. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers as Judge Caprio placed the money in Maria's hand. Maria began crying immediately, overwhelmed by this unexpected act of kindness from a man she had expected to be intimidating and formal. "Your Honor, I can't accept this. This is too much. I don't know what to say." Judge Caprio's response would create an even more emotionally powerful moment. "Mrs. Gonzalez, you can accept it, and you should accept it. You're working 2 jobs to take care of 3 children. You brought them to court because you had no other choice, and you handled yourself with more dignity and honesty than most people show in much easier circumstances. You're exactly the kind of person who deserves help, and I'm honored to be able to provide it." But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. What he did next would demonstrate why his legacy of compassion extended far beyond the walls of his courtroom. "Officer Rodriguez, please get Mrs. Gonzalez the contact information for the Providence Community Action Program. They have resources for single mothers, including child care assistance and food programs. And Mrs. Gonzalez, when you call them, please tell them that Judge Caprio sent you personally." The emotional impact of this moment extended beyond just Maria and her children. Isabella, who had been quietly watching the entire interaction, tugged on her mother's dress and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Mama, is the judge an angel?" The innocent question from a 6-year-old child captured what everyone in the courtroom was feeling, that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Judge Caprio knelt down to Isabella's level, speaking to her directly. "Isabella, your mama is the angel. She works so hard to take care of you and your brother and sister. You should be very proud of her." He then turned to Miguel, who had been amazingly well behaved throughout the entire proceeding. "And you, young man, did such a good job being quiet and respectful in my courtroom. That shows what a good boy you are." The courtroom spontaneously erupted in applause as spectators, court staff, and even other defendants stood to honor both Maria's dignity and Judge Caprio's compassion. The emotional energy in the room was unlike anything most people present had ever experienced in a legal setting. What happened in the days and weeks following this courtroom encounter would prove that Judge Caprio's impact extended far beyond his immediate act of kindness. The story of Maria and her children quickly spread throughout the Providence community, inspiring others to reach out and offer assistance to this deserving family. Within 24 hours of the court hearing, the restaurant where Maria worked as a lunch server had increased her hours and given her a raise. The manager, who had heard about what happened in court, realized that Maria was exactly the kind of dedicated employee they wanted to support. Other employees began offering to help with childcare, creating an informal network of support that made Maria's work schedule more manageable. The Providence Community Action Program that Judge Caprio had recommended proved to be a lifeline for Maria's family. Not only did they provide her with information about food assistance programs and child care resources, but they also connected her with educational opportunities that could help her improve her long-term earning potential. A local community college offered Maria the chance to take classes toward a certification in medical assisting with flexible scheduling that would work around her current job and child care responsibilities. Local news outlets picked up Maria's story, but they covered it with sensitivity and respect, focusing on Judge Caprio's compassion rather than exploiting Maria's struggles. The coverage led to an outpouring of community support that went far beyond what anyone could have expected. A local child care center offered to provide free daycare services for baby Sophia, allowing Maria to increase her work hours without worrying about child care costs. Perhaps most importantly, other single mothers in the Providence area saw Maria's story and were inspired to seek help for their own situations. The Providence Community Action Program reported a significant increase in calls from single mothers who had previously been too proud or too intimidated to ask for assistance. Maria's dignity in the courtroom and Judge Caprio's compassionate response had created a ripple effect that helped many other families in need. The psychological impact on Maria herself was transformative. For months, she had felt isolated and overwhelmed by the challenges of single parenthood and financial stress. Judge Caprio's recognition of her worth and dignity as a person, combined with the community support that followed, gave her a renewed sense of hope and possibility for her family's future. Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss my parking ticket, Maria would later say. He reminded me that I'm not alone, that there are good people in the world who understand that sometimes we all need help. When someone like Judge Caprio, someone so respected and important, treats you with dignity and kindness, it changes how you see yourself and what you think is possible. The impact on Maria's children was equally significant. Isabella, who had been worried about the family's financial struggles despite her young age, began sleeping better and showing more confidence at school. Miguel, who had witnessed his mother being treated with respect and kindness by an important authority figure, began talking about wanting to be a judge when he grew up so he could help people like his mama. Even baby Sophia seemed to benefit from the reduced stress in the household. With better access to formula and medical care through the community resources Judge Caprio had recommended, she quickly recovered from the cold that had been bothering her and began reaching developmental milestones that had been delayed due to poor nutrition. The legal community took note of Judge Caprio's handling of Maria's case, with many pointing to it as an example of how compassion and justice can work together rather than in opposition. Law schools began using the video of the hearing as a teaching tool, showing future lawyers and judges how understanding the human story behind every case can lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. Mental health professionals also found value in Maria's story, particularly in how Judge Caprio's validation of her worth and dignity had positive psychological effects that extended far beyond the immediate situation. The case became a study in how institutional authority figures can either compound or alleviate the stress experienced by people in difficult circumstances. The economic ripple effects of Judge Caprio's compassion extended throughout the Providence community. The positive publicity surrounding the case led to increased tourism to the area, with many visitors specifically requesting to visit the courthouse where such kindness had been demonstrated. Local businesses reported increased customer traffic from people who had been inspired by the story and wanted to support a community that valued compassion and human dignity. Religious leaders throughout Providence used Maria's story in their sermons as an example of how to treat those who are struggling with dignity and respect. The Archbishop of Providence issued a statement praising Judge Caprio's actions as a perfect example of how we are called to treat our neighbors, especially those who are most vulnerable in our society. Educational institutions also found inspiration in the story. Brown University invited Maria to speak to students about the challenges faced by single mothers and the importance of community support systems. Her presentation, delivered with the same dignity she had shown in Judge Caprio's courtroom, became one of the most attended events in the university's community outreach program. The story also had international resonance, with news outlets around the world covering Judge Caprio's compassionate response to Maria's situation. The case was translated into dozens of languages and shared across social media platforms, reaching millions of people who had never heard of Judge Frank Caprio before, but were moved by his demonstration of how justice and mercy could work together. What made the story even more powerful was its authenticity. This wasn't a staged event or a publicity stunt. It was simply Judge Caprio being himself, demonstrating the same compassion and wisdom that had characterized his entire career. The spontaneous nature of his response, combined with the genuine emotion displayed by Maria and her children, created a moment of pure human connection that resonated with people around the world. The timing of this encounter, coming during Judge Caprio's final weeks on the bench, gave it additional significance. Court staff who had worked with him for years noted that he seemed particularly moved by Maria's case, perhaps because it represented everything he had tried to accomplish during his time as a judge, treating every person who came before his bench with dignity, understanding that behind every case was a human story, and using his position to make a positive difference in people's lives. The legacy of Maria's case continues to influence how the Providence Municipal Court operates. The court has implemented new procedures to help defendants who are struggling financially, including expanded payment plan options and better connections to community resources. These changes, inspired by Judge Caprio's handling of Maria's case, have helped hundreds of other people avoid the impossible choice between legal obligations and basic necessities. Maria herself has become an advocate for other single mothers in the Providence area. She regularly volunteers with the Providence Community Action Program, helping other women navigate the resources that were so valuable to her family. Her story serves as both inspiration and practical guidance for others facing similar challenges. The restaurant where Maria works has implemented a program to provide flexible scheduling and additional support for single-parent employees. This initiative, directly inspired by Maria's story, has made it possible for other working mothers to balance their employment responsibilities with childcare needs. As Judge Frank Caprio prepared to leave the bench for the final time, many observers noted that Maria's case perfectly encapsulated the legacy he was leaving behind. In a world that often seems harsh and unforgiving, Judge Caprio had consistently demonstrated that justice could be administered with compassion, that authority could be exercised with kindness, and that every person deserved to be treated with dignity regardless of their circumstances. The final interaction between Judge Caprio and Maria's family occurred several weeks after the court hearing, when Maria brought the children back to the courthouse to personally thank the judge for his kindness. Isabella had drawn him a picture of the family with the words, "Thank you, Judge Angel," written in careful first-grade handwriting. Miguel had crafted a clay figure of a judge that he had made in preschool. Even baby Sophia, now healthy and thriving, seemed to smile when she saw Judge Caprio. "Mrs. Gonzalez," Judge Caprio said during this visit, "seeing how well your family is doing is the best retirement gift I could possibly receive. You've reminded me why I became a judge in the first place, to help people, to treat everyone with dignity, and to use whatever power I have to make the world a little bit better. If this incredible story of courage, compassion, and the transformative power of human kindness has moved you as much as it moved everyone who witnessed it, please show your support by hitting that like button." Judge Frank Caprio's encounter with Maria Gonzalez and her 3 beautiful children proves that when we choose to see the dignity in every person, especially those who are struggling, we have the power to change lives in ways we never imagined. The judge may have left his bench, but the lessons he taught us about justice, mercy, and human compassion will continue to inspire people for generations to come.